So welcome back to part 4 of my NHL deep dive series. It's been a crazy week, so we had to take a bit of a break, but we are back with team number 29 on my rankings, and that is the Anaheim Ducks. A lot of people thought this team was going to be a 30th, so there shouldn't be too many complaints about the Ducks placement on here. But first of all, let's jump into their off-season moves, and really a quiet off-season here for the Ducks. Not a ton of turnover on this roster, very similar to what Columbus did, basically. They bring in Jansen Harkins and Robbie Fabry at forward. They lose Jakob Silfverberg and Max Jones. For me, this is slightly upgraded. I think Robbie Fabry is better than Jakob Silfverberg. I'd take Jansen Harkins over Max Jones. So they upgraded, but I mean, it's really just at the fringes of this lineup. There's no big swing or anything that they took here. Like the offense more or less is going to be ran the same as it was last year. So it's slightly upgraded, but it's not like a huge difference. I like letting Silfverberg going. He's really kind of fell off the last year or two, and Max Jones just kind of a guy, so there's not really any loss there. Defensively, they bring in Brian Dumoulin. They lose William Lagesson. Again, I think it's a slight upgrade. I really like Brian Dumoulin. I've always been a big Brian Dumoulin fan. I think he was a lot better in his early days in Pittsburgh than the last couple of years, but he's still a very serviceable, solid depth option in defense. And again, I think they slightly upgraded there as well. And in net, no changes. They're running the same tandem they did last year. Despite all of the rumors about John Gibson, he is still on the team. So that's kind of how I have to treat it. Overall, the team got better, but it wasn't like a big upgrade. It's very marginal. And we're going to get into that being more of an issue here in a second. But overall, it is better, but is it good enough? That remains to be seen. So moving into this forward core, they rank number 31 on my rankings, which even to me seemed like kind of shocking that they were this low. But if you kind of dive into everything about this team, it does make sense. And I have a lot of issues with the Ducks as a whole, and I'm going to kind of explain some of them here in a second. And I think the discussion kind of has to begin, though, with Troy Terry, who's been this kind of staple on this offense. He's been their best forward over the last couple years, and his development trajectory seems to be the best of this group outside of Leo Carlsson, who also had a really solid rookie season. I think he was one of the better rookies this season. He wasn't really talked about a ton, at least in the conversations I saw about being in that rookie of the year conversation. But I think he had a really strong debut season, and I expect that to continue as he kind of develops with this core. And finally, Trevor Zegras, who again, he had injuries, and when he did play this year, wasn't very productive, is kind of a wild card in this, right? There's a lot of people who think he might not even be on this team by the start of the season, which is very possible. Again, I have to assume that he is, and I can't not put him on the lineup, obviously. But again, that's a guy who this team is hoping can really take that next step. I mean, I could have put Cutter Gauthier in that spot too as their third guy here. It's their third big impact player. And he's kind of a wild card as well. Daily Faceoff has him playing with Carlson and Terry on that first line, which seems very reasonable. He's probably going to play in the top 6 and get a good look. He did for a bit. So we'll have to see. But after that, I mean, the depth on this team is fine. But it's and I mean, obviously you can throw Alex Killorn on that second line instead of Ryan Strome if you want to. But again, I mean, Strome, Fabry, and McTavish as your third line still isn't that bad either. It's just this team's very much, obviously Cutter Gauthier is weighing down their overall too, being a top 6 forward with a prospect label very similar to San Jose. We went over this. The fourth line isn't really anything special. I really like Isaac Lindstrom as a fourth C. Their center core is fine. Obviously you want to see growth from Leo Carlsson, but overall, the team is fine. My problem with the Ducks is this. Of this core, where do you see the next upgrade coming? Like, where do you see the next, like, step forward? Because if you look at this, right, like, outside of Leo Carlsson and Cutter Gauthier, right, like, because they're basically, like, a rookie and a second-year player, is Trevor Zegras going to be better than a middle six forward? Like, obviously, I think he gets to maybe a BB plus here, but is he ever going to become that true first-line forward? That's a legitimate question to have at this point in his career. Is Troy Terry going to become a legitimate, like, true first-line forward? I don't know. Is he capped out? Is this what he is now? Maybe, right? Like, what about Mason McTavish? Is Mason McTavish going to be better than a B player? You know, a very good second liner. Maybe, right? Like, I don't know if, and of course you have Leo Carlsson, you have Cutter Gauthier. Even Cutter Gauthier, like, I don't see a true first line player there. I see I see kind of this similar to where everybody else is on this team, right? Like, so outside of Leo Carlsson, like, where's the super high end, like, top line talent right now, right? Like, I don't know if I see it. And even like somebody like a Beckett Seneca, I don't know if he's a true first line kind of player on this team. So those are things that bother me and that I think are legitimate discussions that need to be had about the Ducks here. Is like, is this core good enough? Yeah, like that's the biggest concern for me with this team is like, have they capped out, or is this like, is there another gear to this team? And this year is going to be kind of a big indication of that overall, I think. But I think, like, on paper, this forward core is set up to be fine. But I just don't know if the development trajectory is there in the same way it was maybe 2 years ago with this team. Looking at this blue line, I have them tied for 25th in my rankings, and I think it's good. Like, I think the structure is here. You know, obviously you have Cam Fowler and Radko Gudas as kind of the two big pillars on this blue line, and Cam Fowler's in the decline. Radko Gudas has still been like a very solid, like, second pair defenseman, and a lot of it's funny because I think a lot of like casual fans watch Radko Gudas play and they're like, oh, he hits really hard and he's a, you know, strong Russian defenseman, and it's like, yeah, he is, but he's also like, his positionally, he's very good, and he was in Florida too. Like, this isn't just a new thing for Gudas. Like, he's been a solid defenseman for a couple years now. And I think Cam Fowler's kind of in that same tier, just obviously a different type of player, but he's like kind of that second pair kind of guy. I wouldn't be surprised if he eventually gets moved from Anaheim in the same way that like Josh Manson did. Same kind of situation there. Other than that, like, Vakanainen, I expect to take another step forward. I mean, Mintyukov had a insane first half of the season and then kind of hit a bit of a rough patch in the second half, kind of hit that wall that most young defensemen do at some point in the season, but I expect him to continue to grow. And Olin Zellweger, too, I think is somebody who can find a very sturdy full-time role in this defensive core. So, like, overall, I mean, Brian Dumoulin obviously comes in as depth. I really like that addition, too, as I talked about earlier. Overall, I think this is a good mix of young, talented defensemen who could continue to develop, and you have your kind of three veterans to help them along in that process. So, although they're only 25th, like, I really like the structure of this blue line. I think they have a lot of very talented players, and I'm very interested to see what guys like Mintyukov and Zellweger do with a bit longer of a leash, and especially Mintyukov, who had such a phenomenal start to the season. I think if he can kind of turn that into a full-time, like, 82-game thing, it'll be very beneficial to the overall health of this blue line long-term. But kind of where the forwards, I didn't know if I could see this, like, if the ceiling seemed lower on them than it did a year ago. This year, I think the defense is where the ceiling's pretty high on. Like, I think Vakanainen, Mintyukov, and Zellweger could take big steps this season. And that's kind of where I think the focus on Anaheim's development as a fan and as like an outside perspective should be, instead of on the forward core. Because I think the forward core might stall slightly. I think we could see some big jumps from the young guys on this blue line this season. And finally, we have the goalies. There isn't a ton to say about these guys. Like, there's not a ton of like growth potential in them. Obviously, John Gibson is nowhere near what he was a couple years ago. And I'm one of those people who holds out hope that I think if John Gibson was on a better team and in a better situation where he's competing for Stanley Cups, maybe he becomes a better goalie. It doesn't seem like anybody else in the NHL wants to take that risk, especially with the term and the money on his contract, which I totally understand. I think there's a lot less risky goalies on the market for a lot cheaper. But I still think there's something there. We'll see. I could be just living in the past of him being like the best goalie in the world like 4 years ago. And Lucas Dostal is a fine like option for this team. Like, I don't think this goaltending tandem is bad. It doesn't really give me any hope for like a long-term vision, but it's fine. It does what it's supposed to do, similar to how San Jose's, the team they were tied with for 27th, also just kind of does what it's supposed to do. And at this point, the focus on Anaheim is the forward and the defensive core. They just need these goalies to be good enough, and I think they both will be. And we'll see. Maybe John Gibson does end up getting moved. Maybe he does bounce back at some point. I still hold out hope for that, which is why he's a C. Like, some people might even think that's too high, but I think and compared to like the numbers of like the D and D minus goalies, he's kind of been in that group like over the last little bit, but I'm still holding hope for John Gibson. I think it would be disrespectful to not give him a C at this point. But I definitely think I might get pushed back in the fact that he might be rated too high. So we'll see. But yeah, overall, like, I think the Ducks there's not a whole lot different here than last year, but I think the question really is like, what can they squeeze out of these young players? Can they get another gear out of these young guys, and can they continue their development curve? That's the big thing I'm watching for here at this point. And offensively, I have a lot of questions about that, and I think that's reasonable at this point. And the blue line is like, I have very high hopes for the blue line, but again, we have to see it, and I think they have the right pieces in place to help them get there. But this is kind of a make or break here for the Ducks, because their core is hitting the stride they should be. This is kind of the point it's supposed to turn around, and we'll see if it does. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about the Ducks in the comments down below, and we will see you very soon for number 28, who was also very close in this group, by the way. It was Calgary, Anaheim, and my next team. We're all like within like 3 points of each other in the overall rankings. So like, these teams were pretty close. But anyway, there you go. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and if you enjoy, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.